Oh, I just talked for 10 minutes, but my phone wasn't working. Right, Pop? There's Pearl while we're here. Hey, puppy, you gonna say hi? No, you're not. We're outside. Ugh, I talked and talked. Oh, well. Welcome to the Flame and Fiber Podcast. Hello. Welcome to the Flame and Fiber Podcast. This is take 3. I'm Barbara, also known as Diva S on Instagram and Ravelry. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for coming back. Those of you who've been here before, welcome back. And thank you so much to the new subscribers. You've all been celebrated to Dennis. Every time I get a new, oh, I got a new subscriber. And if sometimes YouTube tells me the name of the new subscriber, so Dennis hears that too, if I know. But if I don't, he just knows I got another number. But I have to admit, I do look. I am so excited about my subscribers. You're so lovely to me, all of you. And thank you so much for the comments and the messages. I really appreciate it. I really, really do. You're my people. My people. So I'm drinking my first cup of coffee, although since this is take 2, you won't be watching my first sip, but it is my first cup. My last podcast, you got my first sip, which is like, oh. But the first cup works. As you can see, I'm outside. This is my backyard behind me. And Pearl is sitting over here in the sun next to me. She likes to lay in the sun. It's going to be 80 today. It's supposed to be really a pretty lovely day. And Dennis and I have a lot going on. And there's a lot to talk about. Actually, there's a lot to talk about, but there's not a lot of knitting. I mean, there's a lot of knitting, but I only have one project. Anyway. And my one project is I am knitting on the Vitamin D by Heidi Kiermaier. And I had just cast it on. I think I had cast it on in my last podcast. I should have looked at the beginning of that podcast just to check. I know I was showing you the swatch a lot, but I think I had actually cast it on, but it was only like this big. It is all done except for one sleeve to go. One sleeve. I am so happy with it. I will have Dennis take a picture of me wearing this with my one sleeve so that I can show it to you with me in it. But I am really tickled with how it has turned out. And this has been such a fun knit. Oh my gosh. I was in a bit of a knitting slump. You know, I was picking up my knitting because I thought, you know, I have a knitting podcast. I've got to show some knitting, which is not how you want to be knitting. You don't want to knit. I mean, talk about obligation knitting, and I do feel an obligation to you to knit. But usually it doesn't matter because I'm going to be knitting anyway. But I've been going through this slump, and so periodically not feeling like knitting. I really enjoyed knitting this sweater, and I grabbed it. And at times when, I mean, I was knitting while I was reading. I've been doing a lot of reading, and it has cut into my knitting time. But I figured out how, you know, like I got a stand, and I got myself set up. And this is simple enough knitting that you don't have to think about it too much, and you don't have to look all the time. So you can read while you're knitting it. This front is so much fun to me. This is the front that, you know, and it's just simple yarn overs and then and short rows. And look at this fun, you know, and the yarn is showing it up so beautifully, I think. Oh, I'm so tickled with it. But, and it was fun. It was really fun. And I was so grateful that it was so much fun to knit. I did not alternate skeins until I was at the very end. I like alternated 3 rows. That's it. When I was changing balls, and I cannot tell where I did that on this sweater. So I'm very happy about that, because alternating skeins is a pain. I was a little concerned that I might have some really unpleasant pooling, but I didn't, and I don't know why I was worried about that, because the colors are so great. I don't know why it would be unpleasant even if it pooled. I mean, I got a little of the dark pooling right there, and it has enough variegation in the yarn that it kind of shows off the short row action there. So this has got a, you know, the front of it is like a waterfall, front. So I will see when I'll see in the picture how it hangs. I did a gauge swatch, and so I started, and I thought that I should be using the needle that it said in the pattern, which is unusual for me. I think my gauge must be loosening up, because I used to have to go up at least 2 needle sizes when I was doing anything, because my knitting was so tight. I mean, I was having trouble sliding the stitches on my needle. That's how tight I was knitting. It was kind of crazy. So I would just, when I started swatching for anything, I would always start 2 needles above what the suggested needle was, and then go from there to try to figure out my needle size I should be using. But you long-time viewers know that my gauge swatches are big fat liars, and so they're almost useless, but I do it anyway for a sweater. So anyway, my swatch turned out to be, and I washed my swatch, and it turned out to be gauge for, on a size 4 needle, like the pattern called for, which surprised me. So you start out at the top of the neck. It has an added garter later, but so you start out at the top of the neck, and you're knitting, you know, the front and the sleeves, and you're going across. It's a raglan style cardigan, and you start at the top. So I was knitting it on size 4s, and I got to about 2 inches, and kind of rechecked my gauge and realized that I was too tight. I was knitting it a little bit too tight. Oh, back up. So when I did my gauge swatch, I was getting 21 stitches to the inch instead of the 24 at the size 4 needle. But I didn't want to go down a needle size because I liked the way the fabric was. Where does it say gauge? Yeah, 24. And I got 24 stitches by 32 rows, and I got 21 stitches by 30 rows. So I even wrote that down on my paper. I don't know how that happened. So anyway, I went down a size on the pattern. I was going between the M2 and the size L. I mean, it's an open sweater, so I was going between the two, which would I do, and then I thought, oh, let me do the L, because, you know, it's open and it's supposed to be flowy, so if it's a little bit big, it wouldn't have been big. It would have been just right. But I've been frustrated that a lot of the sweaters I've been knitting lately have been too big for me, and so I was thinking I would go down a little bit. And then I thought, no. But after I did my gauge swatch, I did decide to go down to the M2 because my 24 stitches is going to be longer than 4 inches. So I thought that would build in, you know, the difference in the room. So then as I'm knitting, I'm not getting 21 anymore. Now I'm getting 24, which was too many. And I also have the problem, and I forget what it's called, where my purl stitches are looser than my knit stitches. And since this is a cardigan, you're knitting it back and forth, stockinette. you know, knitting and then purling back. And so since my purl stitches were looser, what I did was on my knit stitches, I went up a needle size, except that I went up 2 needle sizes because I was doing a 4, but I couldn't find my 5 needle interchangeables. I'm doing this on my Lickas. I couldn't find my 5 interchangeable needle part. It must be in a project somewhere, so I used a 6. Hey, you know, I'm the boss of my knitting. So I used a 6 on the knit side and a 4 on the purl side. And I got a lovely, lovely fabric that, and the sweater fits me beautifully. So that worked out. For the sleeves, I used a 12-inch 6 needle on the sleeves, and my tension on my sleeve is a little bit tighter, and I don't know if you can see that. I mean, this is a really loose row. I must have just been like so relaxed when I was doing that purl row. So, I mean, it really highlights the difference, but right here is where I picked up the stitches. So my gauge is a lot, and don't go by that one row because that row is ridiculous. But these rows are still looser than these rows. So I did a size 6, and I decided that it looked like the sleeve was going to be loose anyway. So if my gauge was a little tighter on the sleeve, it would be okay. And so I went with the 6 because I did have a 7, 12-inch 7, size 7, but I went with the 6. And I'm not unhappy with it, and you can only see that because I pointed it out, and because I have that really, really crappy row that was so loose. Sometimes I do that. I'm like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking about there? So I have a few places where I have to darn. I ended up with a hole right there. It must be a yarn over from long ago, but I don't know how that happened, and I'm just noticing it now. Yeah. Funny. So that'll get a darning. That'll be fine. The other place that I have to work on is, because I was able to knit this without looking, that meant that, you know, I didn't always do the best job. And I had right there in the middle of my plain stockinette part of the back, I discovered a yarn over about 6 rows after I had done it. So I dropped it down, but of course then it makes it so wide. So I have blocked this, and now I just need to sit for, you know, a little while with my needle and just move my stitches around a little bit to close up that space. So there, you can see it right in the middle there. So I just needed to, you know, make some room in every row with the other stitches, and that will go away eventually. But meanwhile, I'm not worried about it. But that was because I was knitting and reading and not paying attention, and 6 rows later, I'm like, what the heck is this? Well, that's not the only place that happened, but it was the only place it happened 6 rows ago, and it made this big space. But, you know, those things happen on the back, and I can see it when I'm wearing it. So anyway, I'm really enjoying this pattern. I love the way those short rows look. I hope it drapes nicely on me when I'm wearing it, and I'll have Dennis take a picture of me. And this is how much I have of the left of the 3rd ball. So obviously I'm going to have to go into the 4th ball for my sleeve, but I'm going to have quite a bit of this yarn left. And the yarn is Brooks Farm Yarn, Lancaster, Texas. I got this yarn at Rhinebeck 2 years ago. Not this past Rhinebeck, but the Rhinebeck before, when I was there with the Mean Girls. We were shopping together at the time, and I think Stephanie got some yarn there too. So this yarn was actually very reasonable. It's a solo silk, 50-50 fine wool silk single ply, 4 ounces, 400 yards, which makes it a sport weight. And it was $23 was the list price, but I'm pretty sure we got buy 3, get the 4th one for free. So I think this sweater was less than $75. Well, and I'm gonna have a ton of it left. And I really love, I've enjoyed the pattern. The yarn is yummy. I've been so tickled with this project. This is just what I needed. And thank you, Leslie, for the pattern. Leslie of Not Quite Enough Yarn gave me this pattern for my birthday, which was so sweet of her. And I'm really liking it. One thing that I found, and I don't know if you can see along here where the shirt rows are. See those little floaty looking things? One side I have the little floaty things. I just was doing short rows, wrap and turn, and picking up the wraps, and this is what happened when I picked up the wraps. But it only happened on one side, I'm pretty sure. The other side is much subtler. Much subtler. So the way I was doing the wrap and turns, picking up the wraps, meant that I think when I was picking up wraps on the purl side, they look different than when I picked them up on the knit side. So my guess is this was, I purled back across those rows, picking up the wraps, and that's why they show. The only reason you see it is because of this variegated yarn, and so the yarn is sometimes a little bit of a different color. So it's not, and once again, it doesn't worry me. Also because, well, I'm outside, because it's got silk in it, so it's a little shiny, and I'm like, oh, there, I just noticed it. But again, doesn't bother me. If I find myself wearing this sweater a lot, which I might just do because I get cold in air conditioning. I mean, this is a summer sweater for me. And the sleeve ended up a little loose on me. Now, the sleeve is supposed to, I did all the decreases, but I put the cuff in right after the last decrease because it's written to be bracelet length, which would be another 3 inches on here. But I don't like bracelet length. I like 3/4. But this was the end of the decreases. If it was bracelet length, it would be really open at the wrist. And I don't think I would like that. Now, I am thinking about whether I want it a little closer. But I don't think it really matters at 3/4 because I'm not really going to push them up much. And it's summer, so having a little airflow isn't terrible. I need to decide if I like the way it looks. If I'm okay with how it looks, then I'm going to keep going with it. If not, then I can take it back. I would take it back probably 4 inches and double the number of decreases. And that would pull it in a little bit, but I'm not sure. I don't know that I care. I think I'm okay with it, so I'll sit on that. I'll start the next sleeve and get all the way down there and get down to, the last 5 decreases and then decide, do I want to decrease more? And if so, then I'll go back and I'll fix that sleeve. So this is my vitamin D in this yummy silk wool yarn that I'm so tickled with. I'm so happy with it, and I'm even happier with how much joy I had knitting it. That was so special to me because I was feeling a little bit bummed about not being excited to knit. I don't want to not be excited to knit because that is not a happy place to be. I love these short rows, and I love the way the short rows show in this yarn. So, I'll have to take my picture with my one arm and show you what it looks like on. And that is literally the only thing that I have been knitting on since I spoke to you last. And it has made me so happy. I'm so thrilled that I have enjoyed it as much as I did. And that I got as far as I did. I finished the sleeve last night during my virtual knit night. Anyway, that's all my knitting. But I have stuff to talk about. I got a lot going on. Today is Thursday, May 2nd. And besides doing the podcast, which won't take as long as it might because I'm done with my knitting, I will be packing and cleaning up the house a little bit because tomorrow we leave on our trip. We're going on a Viking river cruise from St. Petersburg to Moscow. And so tomorrow we head to St. Petersburg via Frankfurt. We're going through Frankfurt. I've never been through Frankfurt before, but we aren't stopping. We're just changing planes. You know, we'll just be there a couple of hours. So anyway, so I'm very excited about that. I have my clothes picked out pretty much. The weather is going to be, it's going to be in the 50s. Right now it's in the 50s in St. Petersburg, the low 50s for the high of the day, and the low 60s for the high of the day in Moscow. So I'm taking my knitwear. I'm going to have my sweaters, I'm taking my shawls, I'm taking my fingerless gloves and my wool hat. So that'll be fun. It'll be my last blast of being able to, oh, I forgot my lipstick. Oh well. My last blast of being able to wear my woolen stuff. I bought lipstick especially for my podcast, and now this is the second time I forgot to wear it. I'll bring it to Moscow. Who knows? Maybe I'll wear lipstick on the boat. Anyway, so I'm very excited about this trip. And I'll be taking lots of pictures. I'll be posting pictures on Instagram if you follow me on Instagram. And I'll talk about the trip in my next podcast when I get back. So the next podcast probably won't be for 3 weeks because the trip is about 2 weeks long. So I'm so excited. But Dennis and Dennis tries not to think about the trips until, because he gets stressed out about the airplane part. He does not like going through airports and taking off his shoes. He doesn't like flying. If he could just beam me up, Scotty, he'd be a happy camper because he really wants to go to Russia. So he tries not to think about it. So he wasn't distracted away from thinking about the trip. But I was, because the other big thing that's gone on is that Dennis and I bought the property next door to us. Sort of. We weren't even, really thinking about it, or certainly weren't talking about it when last I spoke to you. But our elderly neighbor next door died. And the property was put up for sale. And the property next door to ours has a little bit more land. And the house has very excellent sun exposure. And we want to do something with solar. So our plan is to build a house next door. The house that's there is very small and was built in 1964, and I'm hoping that the foundation is in good enough shape that we can build on the foundation, so we'll have a smallish footprint, but we'll add a second floor, so we would have 2 floors. Anyway, it has totally distracted me from thinking about other things, because it was a bit of a whirlwind. Quite frankly, we put in a bid we expected to be rejected, and it wasn't. So we're like, ah! So that's what's going to be going on in our lives for the next couple years. So I'm not sure how much traveling we'll be doing, because we'll be having to spend our money over there and keep an eye on stuff. But we'll still try to go places, but we'll see what happens with that. So the plan is that we build that, and then we'll probably, Dennis has some idea of becoming a land baron and renting this house out, and I don't think so. I think we'll just sell it and recoup the money that we're spending next door. I think it'll be about the same. Our plan is that it'll be about the same, so that We're just switching houses. But the house we move into is a house that we designed for ourselves. The one thing that I'm looking for is having the master bedroom on the same floor as the kitchen. I mean, it sounds a little bit weird to say that, but I find the stairs in my house to be a psychological barrier. I don't have any trouble doing stairs. I go up and down the stairs, but when I get up in the morning, I get dressed and I go downstairs. And I only go upstairs again if I need something up there. So you won't find me in the living room in my pajamas because I do everything upstairs and then I come down. And I'm sure that comes from, work. You get up, get ready for work, you get dressed, you come downstairs, you make your coffee and you leave. That's what I used to do. And anyway, so I find it a psychological barrier. And when we lived in the Seattle area for a couple of years, we rented a house and it had the master bedroom on the first floor, on the same floor as the kitchen. And it was really nice to just get up, wander into the kitchen, start the coffee. It just felt like a more casual lifestyle. And I can imagine as we get older that, doing the stairs could become a problem. So I would really like to be able to get up and just wander in the kitchen and make my coffee. Who knows? Maybe I'll start podcasting in my jammies. Because, I'll be so cash. You'll never know. I could. It could happen. Oh, I am wearing my Summer Dreams by Marcella Chang that I made last year. This is the only kind of yoke patterned sweater that I've ever made. And I really like it. It's a summer sweater. And this yarn is Yakagani Yarns in their silky single. I don't know what it was called. And the color is called Feeling Coy. And I really like this sweater. So, those are all our newses. So I have packing to do. We did Pearl's food yesterday. We feed Pearl raw, so when we go away, we have to package up. So we had to do 14 dinners for her. And freeze them, so we take them to the kennel and then they thaw one a day and feed her. So that's what we had to do yesterday. And since she's become a picky eater and doesn't want to eat her liver, I mean, she's a dog. She's supposed to love liver, but she doesn't want to eat her liver. And the liver is a very important part of a raw diet for dogs. So now we have to make a tartare for her. So we have to grind it up and mix it with burger. So she'll eat her liver, which is a really icky job. But we do it because we love her. She's a rascal, but she's also a sweetheart. So anyway, that's what we did yesterday. Today I'm packing and doing a little straightening. We don't have to leave our house until 2 in the afternoon tomorrow, so I'll have some time tomorrow too. And the nice thing about the trip is we're traveling and we're moving, but we don't have to pack and unpack, and that's so nice. So you just, when you get there, you don't have to dick around in your suitcase every day and then pack it back up and put it out, which sounds like I'm complaining about our trips, and I'm not. I love the traveling that we've been doing, but it is nice to be able to just unpack and then pack again and go home but meanwhile you're still traveling, so that should be fun. So I am looking forward to that part of it too. And we do love boats. We a lot of our trips lately have included some kind of a boat trip because we do like boats. We like cruises, and so I'm very excited about this trip. And I will tell you all about it when we get back. But meanwhile, the other thing I have to do today is figure out what knitting I'm taking with me, because I'm taking the vitamin D. If I don't finish the sleeve today, which I don't expect I will, but I will have it all on the needle and everything. It's not on the needle yet, but I will have it started. So that will likely be my plain knitting on the way to Frankfurt. or on the way to St. Petersburg, will be the final sleeve of this. So I'm planning on wearing this sweater on the trip. I did block it. I blocked the body before I started the sleeves, because when I did the garter ridge, at the bottom you do garter stitch. And when I was knitting it, that garter edge was flipping up. And I have another sweater, store-bought sweater, where the hem, every part of the hem flips up the whole, and there's nothing you can do about that. So I wanted to make sure that this wasn't going to do that, and if it was, then try to figure out something with the knitting that would stop it from doing that, and I have no idea what that would have been. But I wanted to know. So I blocked it, and it's fine. So the sweater's already blocked. The sleeves won't be blocked, but I don't think that's going to be a problem. The, eyelets and things are the main thing that you have to worry about. So it will be blocked. I'll be weaving in the ends and darning those little holes and wearing my sweater on my trip. I'm so excited. But so I have to figure out what knitting I'm going to be taking, because this is the only thing I'm actively working on. I'm definitely going to take my socks. I have some socks that I was working on that I'm partway through the heel. I'm doing I do the Vanilla's the New Black heel, and I'm partway through the heel, and I probably am going to toss a couple more balls of sock yarn in my bag, so that if I wanted to, I could just sit and make socks the whole time. I love wearing my socks, and I haven't made, I was kind of off socks for 6 or 8 months, maybe almost the whole year last year. So I didn't make a lot of socks last year, so I could use more socks. And you get a lot of knitting out of one ball of yarn. Since I'm having my my yarn no-buy year, I am not anticipating buying any yarn, but I will put in a caveat here that if I happen to be near a place where I can buy yarn, and I am not intending to go out of my way to be near a place where I can buy yarn, but if I can buy yarn in Russia, I might buy a little bit of yarn for a souvenir, because I don't expect to be in Russia again. Although Dennis wants to do the Trans-Siberian Railroad, which would definitely put me in Russia. But anyway, so it's possible I might buy a skein of yarn, but I have to bring enough yarn for my whole trip, because I'm not anticipating buying any yarn while I'm there. So I will bring enough yarn for a couple of pairs of socks. The other thing is, I have a sweater. My sweater I made last year for my birthday is a color blue. It's kind of an aqua-y blue. It's blue tending a little toward like a teal, light teal, but on the blue side. That I don't seem to have any shawls that I love with that sweater. So my plan is to go through my stash and see if I can find a skein of yarn that really goes with that sweater. I'm packing that sweater, and I brought along a kind of burgundy color shawl that I made a few years ago out of handspun. That I like the shawl, and so it's like a teal with a burgundy. I mean, it goes okay, but it's not. It took me a while to figure out what I was gonna bring to pair with that sweater. So my plan is to go through my stash and see if I have any lovely single skeins of gorgeous yarn that go with that sweater, and take a 1 skein shawl pattern to knit, because the sweater has a crew neck, so it's not and it's a sport weight sweater. So I just need something around my neck if it's cold, but mainly it's just because it's all the same color sweater. It's not even variegated. And, just for an accessory. So I don't need a big honking shawl. I just need something to wrap around my neck and to, So I'm going to do a one skein shawl. And I have a few one skein shawl patterns that I'll just pick one of the ones that I already have. I don't think I'll be buying a new pattern for that. I have the canopy that was given to me by, I think lovely Linda gave me the canopy shawl pattern, and I think that may be a one skein pattern. If it is, I'll probably do that. If it isn't, I might do like the Twinsy by Andrea, the cat lady, CATT, Craft All the Things. She's got a podcast. She has a pattern, I think it's called the Twinsy, that I bought that I've never knit, and it's so I know for sure it's a one skein pattern. So I'm sure I have plenty of one skein patterns I can choose from, and I'll be doing that. So I might do that if I can find a skein of yarn that I think will go well with that. I might do that for the next trip. I mean, I'm not going to be blocking a shawl while I could, why not? Never say never. I might just do that. So I do have to organize my knitting to make sure that I don't run out of yarn. And I'm not sure how much knitting time I'll have, but we're moving up the river, and there isn't one river that goes between St. Petersburg and Moscow. It's a series of pieces of river, lakes, and canals. So I'll have, plus plane rides. I'll have plenty of time to knit. So I need to make sure I bring enough knitting. So I will be doing that. I also want to remind you about the Craft from Your Stash knit along or craft along that Leslie from Not Quite Enough Yarn and I are doing. It's very simple. If you owned the yarn at the end of 2018 and you started the project in 2019, it qualifies. So Leslie and I each have an FO thread, and I just picked last time, and the prize is going out. The prize is going out today before I leave. So I have to go to the post office today too, one of the other things. So continue to shop in your stash and craft with your lovely stash. And I have to say, I have really enjoyed shopping in my stash a lot. I have beautiful yarn that I love. And I haven't bought yarn since October. And this is now May. So, and to tell you the truth, it's been fun. It's been fine to not have new yarn, and it's been fun to shop in my stash. So I highly recommend it. The only tempting thing for me is if I come across some wonderful yarn in Moscow, I'll be sad if I don't buy it. But, Dennis isn't going to buy me yarn. So I might buy it for myself. But that's not my plan. I'm not seeking out a yarn store in Russia. So the chances of me actually buying yarn in Russia are very, very tiny. But I have been enjoying shopping from my stash, and I highly recommend it. I am in the process of making plans with my the ladies in my virtual knit night to room together at Rhinebeck this year. Now Rhinebeck is going to be a bit of a temptation if I go to Rhinebeck and can manage to not buy any yarn at Rhinebeck. But I've been to Rhinebeck twice. I still have plenty of the yarn that I bought at Rhinebeck that I haven't knit up. So, maybe I don't get to buy any yarn from Rhinebeck until I knit up all the yarn from Rhinebeck that I already have. And I am missing Maryland Sheep and Wool this year, which is the first time since I started knitting. I'm only about 3 hours from there, and so I've gone every year. So this This trip was not intentionally booked at the same time as Maryland Sheep and Wool. I've been having, I book trips and then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. When's Rhinebeck? Oh, wait a minute. When's Maryland Sheep and Wool? So I'm not too sad to be missing Maryland Sheep and Wool, because if I can't buy yarn at Maryland Sheep and Wool until I knit up all the yarn I've bought there, it'll be years till I can shop for yarn at Maryland Sheep and Wool, because I have so much yarn that I bought there. Because I was stupid, the first time I went to Maryland Sheep and Wool, I had no idea what I was doing, and I just bought tons of yarn that I got home, and I'm like, what the hell am I going to do with this? So I have lots of yarn from Maryland that I need to knit up. There's a wonderful booth where they sell naturally dyed yarn, and if you're going to Maryland Sheep and Wool, I can even tell you how to get there. You go in the main door, and you go all the way up to the main drag where all the buildings are to your left, and there's some people out in front of you on the grass. If you go to the right there's only about 5 tents to your right, maybe not even 5. And it's right across from the tent where they do the auction and everything. So if you go to the end of the walkway from the main entrance, and everything going on is going on to your left, go right. And the last tent on the right is these ladies who do natural dyeing. They don't have a website. I think they sell, everything they sell is at Maryland Sheep and Wool. I've shopped there the last couple years, and I have lots of their yarn. And in fact, my other yellow top, my Cell Gris in kind of almost the same color, was naturally dyed with Osage orange. So I have a lot of their yarn to knit up. So I have plenty of yarn. Anyway, I'm missing Maryland Sheep and Wool. And that's okay. That's okay. But it will be a challenge to go to Rhinebeck and not be able to buy any yarn. Of course, there are a lot of things to buy in Rhinebeck that aren't yarn. Apple cider donuts, books. I can't buy fleece either. I can't buy fiber. I have a lot of fiber, and I'm not spinning very much. So anyway, that's where I am now. That's what's happening. I am very excited about our trip, and I don't even know if I'm going to be able to sleep tonight because I'm so excited. But I will keep you all posted. If you follow me on Instagram, DeevaS, DeevaS, you will see pictures from my trip. And I will tell you all about it in my next podcast, which will probably be 3 weeks by the time I get back and get organized and, that kind of thing. So I hope you have lots of time to do the crafting that brings you joy. And I will see you after Moscow.